Hi, everybody. Welcome to Mormonish. I'm Rebecca, and I am joined by my sort of infrequent, but hopefully more frequent co-host, Landon. How are you today, Landon?
Good. We keep saying that, and it keeps being less infrequent. So,
That's right. I know. One of these days, I'm just going to call your boss or your company and say, he's needed here. He's doing the Lord's work, right? Of course, we'd end up living in a tent, but that's okay.
that's right.
And we are joined, of course, by our extremely frequent and favorite person, Ganesh Sharian. How are you today, Ganesh?
I'm fabulous, and what a delight to be with you guys. It's always fun, but it's going to be. I think you're going to just really enjoy this presentation today. I think we're going to have, yeah, it's going to be fun.
It's going to be fun and it's going to be good. And it's something that a lot of us have been talking about lately. Podcasts have been coming out, popping up about this topic, and that is witnesses, right? Witnesses. Who saw what in early Mormonism? Who knew what? Who reported what? Why did they report what they reported? I mean, it seems like there's a renewed interest in the witnesses lately. And that's important, I think, because a lot of times I'm on faithful social media and, I'll see questions. People are, pretty upfront about posting questions and things like that, especially about the Book of Mormon and, and Joseph Smith and his life and his character. And what everybody says is, but the witnesses. It's like it's a slam dunk answer, right? It's a closed book, but the witnesses. And of course, the rest of us phrase it a little different and go, but the witnesses. Right?
It's that TBM witness protection program. They must protect the witnesses at all costs. So
that's right.
We just recently went to Independence. We got
Missouri.
to see gravesite of two of the three witnesses. Learned a lot about the witnesses while we were there. So when I heard that you had Ganesh coming on to talk about the fourth witness, I was like, I got to jump on this. This sounds really interesting. Plus, I just read John Turner's book on Joseph Smith that we're reading in our book club, and just finished that. And a lot of interesting information because, we're going to talk about Isaac Hale, and he had way more interaction with these plates in a lot of cases than probably than David Whitmer did, because they were, I guess the plates ended up being in Martin Harris's. Martin was supposedly around them. Oliver was around them. David Whitmer, they did translate at his house, but they also did at Isaac Hale's house. So I was really interested to see what he has to say.
Yeah.
And along those same lines, Landon, actually, Joseph and Oliver didn't take the plates to Fayette.
That's right.
So actually, David Whitmer has no knowledge of any plates or prop or artifact or, he doesn't, the Whitmer family, there is a much later kind of occurrence, the idea that Mary Whitmer might have been shown the plates. But that is very late, and Mary never says it, and it's never recorded at the time. So that, and in order to kind of allay the discrepancy with regard to the plates and the Whitmers, there's a later story that the angel Moroni, picked up the plates in harmony and transported them to Fayette. But why? And for the Whitmers,
Angel DoorDash.
That's right.
DoorDash.
Here's the place. Well, and it resulted in that really unfortunate title in I think it was a Liahona article or some on the church website, where there's a picture of a woman in some hay and it said, "That night in the barn," right? And it was about Mary Whitner supposedly being shown something, but the rest of us went, "Oh dear, that's title. You might want to think about changing that. That night in the barn." So I think
Oliver Cowdery was a witness to that as well, wasn't he?
But it does seem to be all about the witnesses. And so it's important to know who these people were, why we give credibility to some of their stories and some of the other things that they say. But as we were just talking about witness in general, Ganesh and I were like, Isaac Hale, he really was there. He's like the OG witness. And we don't hear a lot about him. Is it because of what he has to say? Or is he just overlooked? Ganesh is going to dive into all of this for us, because he's little discussed, really, at least in my experience. Maybe others have, learned more about him in Sunday school, but from my experience, he's very little discussed, when he was really, like I said, the OG witness from the origin story right there.
He absolutely is. And let's just dive in, because it's just fascinating. I'll just share my screen and we can go in.
And when we say Isaac Hale, of course, this is Emma's father.
Right.
Yes,
yeah.
Emma's father. And he is so important to the beginning of the church. It's just crazy that we don't talk about him more. He really is the first witness, because he is there at the very beginning. If you can think that he meets he meets Joseph in 1825. So this is a long time, and we're going to go through all of that. But in terms of his overall kind of understanding of the whole Book of Mormon production, he's right. Joseph and Emma moved to Harmony in the end of 1827. So Joseph is, dictating the Book of Mormon with Martin Harris in April of 1828 through to June, and then again the next year with Oliver Cowdery from April to June of 1829. So, there's a year and a half that at least that Isaac Hale sees the production of the Book of Mormon. And so he's really key to understanding it. And he really gives that link between the treasure digging, because he's first met Joseph when Josiah Stoll brings him to Harmony, Pennsylvania, and the Book of Mormon. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. And I just put on here too that something to note is that the Hale's association with Joseph Smith lost them status. That in having Joseph around, they became less than in the eyes of their community. Isaac Hale had, being a prominent part of the city council right up until the point of Joseph coming to stay with them, and with Joseph on the land and him supporting Emma and her husband. People in Harmony did not particularly like Joseph, and they saw the Hales as other once they supported them. So that's just a really interesting dynamic.
I think that we were studying on our trip about each of the witnesses, and we were reading up on, Oliver Cowdery, Turner's book. Same thing happened to him, after all that nonsense back in Nauvoo. He tried to be a lawyer, tried to run for, he was several times just kind of, oh, no, yeah, you're that guy. You're associated with that. So unfortunately, I think that happened to a lot of them.
Yeah. And we'll see that as we go on and why that might be the case. Here's a little map of the area, and if you go to Harmony, Pennsylvania, it's called Susquehanna now, but back in the time in the early 1820s, it was called Harmony. And here I've got some pictures. This is the Hale home. It's a bit of a mansion. It's 2 stories. It's gorgeous inside. It's got, you go there, it's got wallpaper, which is pretty impressive for that time and age. It's very comfortable. The Hales had been in Pennsylvania since the end, basically the 1790s. And so they were really well established by the time that Joseph and Emma, Emma was growing up and they married. So they were well-to-do as a family. And you can see on this map that the highway that runs from kind of through Pennsylvania, Highway 171, goes right past Isaac Hale's house. And he put the couple on a little plot of a little cottage nearby. It's about 100 yards from Isaac Hale's home through to the little cottage that Joseph Smith and Emma made as their home. And there's a picture of that little cottage there. It's nice. It was not quite as nice as Joseph's frame house, but it was certainly nicer than the log cabin that Joseph grew up in, and it was theirs. Right, there was just a couple of them, just Joseph and Emma initially, and so they had all of this space, all of this room. It was like a mansion for Joseph, especially after living in a very cramped house with lots of siblings.
I was going to say, I've lived my whole life and I don't have a house on 13 and a half acres. And he got that right as soon as he got married, right? He married Emma and he gave him this land. So,
well, and that's the key. And as you describe, Emma and how she was raised, she must have also been considered a prominent person, a member of a prominent family, a catch, if you will, somebody that might be expected to marry someone else in a prominent position. So I think that was a little different than that she married somebody like Joseph Smith. And maybe that contributed to how the family was sort of looked at. Like, oh my gosh, it didn't elevate their status at all. It made them kind of suspect in a lot of things.
You're absolutely right. The Hales were foundation members of that community. They were founders. So they were well-to-do. They were well-respected. They had a lot of influence. It was a big deal. The marriage. We'll talk about that in a second. So if we just, I thought that just might be useful to say that Joseph and Emma, when they first came to Harmony, Pennsylvania, they lived with the Hales in their mansion, in their big house. Emma's newly pregnant. This is the end of 1827. They're kind of fleeing Harmony, Pennsylvania. They're fleeing Palmyra because of persecution. They go live with the Hale family, and basically Isaac can't put up with Joseph, and we'll talk about that in a second. But so they move. Once one of the brothers who's living in this cottage, he moves out, goes somewhere else. They move them just down the road, this 100 yards, to this little cottage, and that's where they are at the beginning of 1828. And then at the beginning of 1829, Joseph is able to acquire the cottage as his own. And this happens because of Oliver Cowdery. And this is so important to understand. So at the top, I've just got a little, the agreement, there's an actual agreement with signed parties. So Isaac Hale agrees to sell this 13 acres and cottage to Joseph, and the witnesses are Samuel Smith and Oliver Cowdery. So have a look at this date. What's interesting about this date? Does anybody?
State of Pennsylvania.
Oh, date. Sorry.
Oh, date. Yeah, I was going to ask. Is he? Oh, it's 6 April.
6 April.
Exactly. A year before the church. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly a year. And I'm not sure that this, is this just a coincidence or is this providence? Does this say something about the church? Because on the 6th, so Oliver hears about Joseph because he's living with the Smiths in Manchester. He decides that after he's finished his stint as a school teacher, he's going to travel with Samuel Smith down to Harmony, Pennsylvania to meet Joseph and help. And they get there on the 5th of April, 1829. And then Joseph tells him about all his stories, and Oliver is converted, and Oliver wants to help. And the way that Oliver helps is that Oliver puts forward, he's got $65 from his job in Manchester as a school teacher, and he gives that to Joseph to create a mortgage on the cottage.
So are you saying that within one day of meeting Joseph Smith, Oliver Cowdery already hands him over his entire salary?
Correct.
I'm telling you,
Wow.
whatever you want to say about Joseph Smith, he had a power. He had a
Mm.
power over people to get them to do that. I mean, who does that? That's pretty fascinating.
This is all of Oliver's money, all of it,
Mm-hmm.
because we'll learn a little later that they are poor after this. Oliver doesn't have any money. He's given it all to Joseph. So it's crazy, but makes um, that makes Oliver a financial investor in
Yeah.
this project,
Mm-hmm.
right? He's funding it because, yeah, we'll just go to the next slide and you can see why.
So he's paying money here before Martin Harris has had to pay out anything, because Martin Harris mortgages his farm to publish the Book of Mormon, but he's got $65 into this already, before they've even started translating.
Yes, correct. Except that Martin has already been a benefactor. I mean, he gave the $50 for Emma and Joseph to move from Palmyra through to Harmony, Pennsylvania, and then he's come down and he's scribed for Joseph from April to June.
That's right. Before he lost him, and then he went back and lost, because he was translating. But then $50 and $64. So we've got 104 out of the $200 purchase price seems to have come from two of the three witnesses.
Oh well, yeah. Well, Martin doesn't put any money towards this. Martin's investment initially, is to help the couple move, and then he supports them during the dictation process in 1828. So Martin is already a financial
right.
Yeah,
like I said, no matter how you slice it, no matter what the money goes for, anybody that he meets, that Joseph meets, he is able to convince that it's a good idea to help fund him or his cause or his project or his lifestyle, whatever it may be. He has this power.
To be fair, and there's some other information we're not going to talk about today that suggests that all of these people feel like they're going to get a financial benefit from the publishing of the Book of Mormon. They're not looking at this as some kind of service to humanity. They are looking at it as a business opportunity.
Ground floor, right?
Yeah.
Ground floor with Joseph.
Yeah,
that's it.
That's right.
I wish I'd gotten in on the ground floor with Joseph. I mean, I would have a piece of that 200 and whatever billion dollars it is. Of course, I actually contributed most of my life to it also. But
yeah, so you have a share. You have a share. So
share.
Okay. Joseph doesn't talk about his in-laws very much. In fact, there's very few references to it. But here are three. Maybe Rebecca, can you read these for us?
Yeah, these are Joseph's accounts of Isaac. So, and I have to say, I've always loved that picture. Joseph just looks, I don't know who painted that, but yeah, Emma looks like, oh my God. And Joseph just looks, anyway. All right. This is the Joseph Smith History 158. Owing to my continuing to assert that I have seen a vision, persecution still follows me. And my wife's father's family were very much opposed to our being married. You think? I was therefore under the necessity of taking her elsewhere, taking Emma somewhere else. So we went and were married at the house of Squire Tarbell in South Bainbridge, Shenango. Is that how you pronounce it? Shenango County, New York. Yeah, they don't talk about that when they give the love story of Emma and Joseph very much, do they? Yeah, that's not an auspicious start, especially back then. Now, my wife had written some for me to translate, and also my brother Samuel H. Smith, but we had become reduced in property, and my wife's father was about to turn me out of doors. He'd had it with his son-in-law, right? And that's part of the Joseph Smith history in 1832. Joseph Smith history 175. Go ahead.
Just before we go here, that is the beginning of 1829. So this is when Oliver comes and gives his money, and they are able to stay, because at that point Joseph is going to be evicted. Joseph has no
Oh,
money, and
okay.
and Isaac thinks he's a deadbeat, and this kind of appeases Isaac to let them stay because they are now going to buy this property for them and have
Oh,
given them so it's a really big deal that Oliver came and that
okay.
Oliver came with money and made this possible for
Yeah.
Joseph to purchase the property and have it apart from everybody so that he could then, you know, work on the
See,
Book of Mormon and not have Isaac kind of breathing over his neck. What are you doing? You
yeah, no,
said that you would do this.
that changes the whole way I see the story though, because on the prior slide, I thought, oh, Joseph finally realized, you know what? I'm going to man up. I'm going to buy this property for me and my wife. I'm going to buy it for my father-in-law. Not at all. His father-in-law is like, get out. This is enough, you know?
You're a
And
freeloader.
yeah,
You
you're a
get
freeloader. And instead of that, he goes and he, drums up money from other people. I'm sure that Isaac Hale, his father-in-law, was not impressed. It's like, oh, yeah, you didn't earn this. You borrowed it from somebody with your crazy stories. That changes everything. He was about to be thrown out. And I'm sure that was part of the story. But yeah, I'm sure that did not redeem him in the eyes of his father-in-law, that he was able to just borrow money instead of somehow making it and, offering to buy. So,
And
wow.
I've got a question, Ganesh. Here he says that he's continuing to assert that he'd seen a vision. Um, he wrote this in 1832, and of course, we know that there was no first vision written about prior to
oh
1832. Does
Oh.
does his father-in-law seem to know anything about a vision, or does
Or
he
is it
ever mention a
Moroni?
vision?
Is he talking
ah
about
you
Moroni?
Yeah,
yeah
he
no
may.
you good observation. That first sentence at the top, Joseph Smith History 158, that's written in 1838.
Ah,
Yes, so you're absolutely right. There is no contemporary evidence that Joseph is persecuted because he'd had a vision, and or that that's a reason why Emma's family don't like him. That's anachronistic. That's not
yeah.
in
Well,
keeping with the
it sounds a
historical.
lot better than saying, owning to my continuing to assert that I am a deadbeat and will not work or support my wife in any way. My wife's father's family was very much opposed. That doesn't sound as good as saying, oh, because I'm a
Yes,
religious man and I've seen, yeah, I
yeah,
see how this goes.
absolutely, absolutely. But that second paragraph is from the 1832, and then
Okay.
the next paragraph is from the 1838. Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Go on. It says, we have been threatened with being mobbed from time to time, and this too by professors of religion. And their intentions of mobbing us were only counteracted by the influence of my wife's father's family, probably their prominence, right? Under divine providence, who had become very friendly to me and who were opposed to mobs and were willing that I should be allowed to continue the work of translation without interruption, and therefore offered and promised us protection from all unlawful proceedings as far as in them lay. So I'm thinking it was all for Emma. I'm thinking that when you're a parent and if your child marries someone that you're just like, oh, why? You're still going to try to protect your child, despite who they've married. So I feel like that's the motivation of Isaac Hale. It's all for Emma. It's for a grandchild, right? And she's in a horrible situation with her husband, Joseph. And, I think they're just thinking of her. That's my opinion anyway.
What's the time frame on this again? Because this seems odd that he's saying that professors of religion and there's all these mobs chasing him and his family. I'm assuming is this while they're in Harmony, or is this where they're somewhere else and they had to leave? Where are these mobs and who are these mobs and professors of religion? Professors of religion sounds like uh, you know church leaders from other churches.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
were they being mobbed in Harmony, or is this somewhere else?
Yeah, it's a good question that we just don't have much information to be able to tell. But this seems to relate to basically the end of May, the beginning of June, 1829. This is just before David Whitmer comes to rescue Oliver Cowdery and
Okay.
um, Joseph Smith and take them to Fayette. So,
So
and
why did they have to go to Fayette if Emma's family is protecting them and they seem to be getting on along marvelously according to this?
Well, so he's kind of talking about that just before that happened. So, from the time that that Oliver and Joseph are doing the dictation from April through to June of 1829, and then things get pretty hairy in Harmony, and then they have to leave.
So they can't be protected despite the prominence.
Yeah,
Like you said, Isaac Hale has fallen in prominence. He doesn't have
yes,
the weight
correct.
that he used to, and it's just too much. So, and I think to answer your question, Landon, the mob was just everywhere. It was just pervasive. It was just,
Yeah,
you know what I mean? The concept, think about Landon and I visited the Independence Visitor Center, and they just kept saying things like, well, that's what mobs do. Well, mobs will mob. You know, it was all very vague. It was like
Well,
communism, right? A
what
communist threat in the 50s. It's just there. It's all around, rearing its ugly head every once in a while. And it's just a great way to make yourself a sympathetic figure if you constantly write that you're constantly in danger.
one thing I seemed to learn from our trip was whenever Joseph says the word mob, what he means is debt collectors.
Yeah. Yeah.
Somebody's coming after him
Yeah.
for money and trying to collect, and so he's got to get out of town.
Right. And often ex-Mormons, people that were, with his group, gave him money. He owes them money, and now they're trying to collect. So
Yeah, and of
yeah,
course,
we
there's
kind of
no
learned
church
that.
here yet, but that
Yeah.
seemed to be, a lot of their troubles seemed to be more people trying to collect monies that was owed to them than it was any kind of religious mob.
Yeah.
and that's quite possible in this case. They are very poor. They're not being supported by Emma's family, obviously, and so they are. I've got a couple of quotes at the end of this where Joseph Knight is talking about how he's helping them financially. Because they have nothing. Oliver's given all his life savings to this mortgage, and so he's got nothing either, right? So it's pretty dire. A couple of things to note is, if we go back to the map, you see that the main road runs right past Joseph's cottage and Isaac Hale's home. So there are people going past the house all the time, and so he's probably getting some jeering. They're talking about him. That's probably what's going on. It's hard to tell whether he felt like he was in physical danger, but it certainly would have been annoying. Um, the other thing to note is that they're in Pennsylvania, which is really fortunate for Joseph, because Pennsylvania is founded by William Penn. Pennsylvania is a commonwealth. William Penn was jailed in England for his modalism, as a heresy against Trinitarianism, and he was able to kind of um, uh, sue for his freedom, and he was able to do so. But when he established the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, he did so with a really strong charter of tolerance for religious belief. And so the people in the state of Pennsylvania, and probably certainly Emma's family, the Hales, they were really interested in religious freedom, even though they didn't like what Joseph was doing. And so he got a lot of protection by being in Pennsylvania that he might not have got, certainly in Palmyra.
But
And
people still
that's,
thought he was weird. Like tour
yeah, yeah,
buses driving down that road were like, and over there on the left, there's this guy. He says this,
yeah,
right? He's
correct,
doing
correct.
this. Yeah, let's walk up to his door and see what he's translating. So I can see that persecution and just making fun, mocking.
When Joseph comes back to Harmony, after the Book of Mormon's finished, and and Hiram and Oliver are working on the printer's manuscript and delivering pages to the Grandin printer, Joseph in October of 1829 writes a letter to Oliver, and one of the things he says in the letter is basically, um, the whatever disturbance it is that has caused them to have to leave Harmony. Joseph says basically those people are being held to account and have been censured, and so there is some indication that there is some persecution. Is it a mob, or is it one person standing outside their house going, "You're a fake, you're a fake, you're a fake"? Who knows? But whatever, that person has been censured and basically said, "Look, stop," and Joseph feels like he needs to mention that to Oliver. So it's there was obviously something, we just don't know exactly what it was. And so I thought a bit of an intro to Isaac, worth knowing a little bit about him. So he's actually born in 1763 in Connecticut. So he's a New Englander. But he moves when he's quite young to live with his grandfather. His I think his dad dies. His mother's not in a position to take care of him, so he goes to live with his grandparents, and he he lives with them as a young boy through to manhood. His father, or his grandfather, Aaron Ward, died in the Revolutionary War in 1777, and and um and Isaac Hale even serves in the Revolutionary War. So this is how close we're talking to the war. Like the the War of Independence is the history of the Hale family. This is Emma's dad serves in that military. He marries Elizabeth Lewis in 1790, and they move to Pennsylvania. And Indians help them to settle in this particular area, and so he becomes a farmer, a hunter. He's known for going out in the woods, killing stuff, and sending it down the Susquehanna to for trade. And he also provides lodgings, which is why Josiah Stoll and the Smiths end up lodging at his house when they're on this treasure dig in 1825. He's a Methodist. His wife's brother Nathaniel is actually the local Methodist minister, and he converts to Methodism. There's this interesting story about Emma actually as a young child praying in the woods, and he overhears her praying for her family, and it softens Isaac's heart, and so he converts to Methodism because of Emma and her righteousness as a young girl. And of course, 1825, he boards the Stoll, Josiah Stoll and the company, and so he is 62 when he first meets Joseph. He's an older man, he's had Emma when he's, like a 40-year-old. And he's well established in that area. They're wealthy. Isaac Hale is about 10 years older than Joseph's father, so to put it in perspective. In 1827, we're going to talk about this some more, but Emma elopes with Joseph. And at the end of 1827, as we talked about before, Emma returns with Joseph to live with the Hales. They've invited her to come because she's now pregnant. She is, and they love Emma. They really feel her loss, and her being pregnant is a big deal. It's a way back into the family after this terrible split. Another 1828, on June the 15th, that baby dies, and Martin loses the manuscript, and Joseph tries to join Methodism. So he tries to join the family religion. He gets kicked out. We'll talk about that a little bit more. And then on April 6th, as we talked about, in 1829, Isaac sells the nearby farmlet along with the cottage to Joseph as he was facing eviction, but Oliver basically saves the day. And then just to be aware where this story goes, 1830 in August, the Smiths leave Harmony and they never return. So Emma doesn't see her father again after 1830. And she sees her mother. Her mother comes to visit in where they are in Nauvoo, but her father dies on the 11th of January 1839. And this is the same year that just the next year, 1840, is baptisms for the dead are implemented in Nauvoo, and Emma is baptized as proxy for Isaac.
Did they ever sell that farm that they bought?
Yes. So Joseph came. So when Joseph left in August, or Joseph and Emma left in August of 1830, they sublet the farm, so somebody else kind of was tenants on there. And then I think it's 1831. Joseph actually comes back and they sell the farm, and they use the money. I don't know if Oliver ever got his money back for his initial investment, but
I was just going to say, it seems a little odd that the Lord would require Martin Harris to mortgage his farm for the Book of Mormon, but he didn't seem to make Joseph mortgage his farm for the Book of Mormon.
Joseph's farm was not worth that much, actually.
Sure.
He does take out a bit of
$200, but still.
yeah, that's right. Yes, yeah. Well,
it's the sacrifice we learn from Ganesh, not the amount.
Well, it's really interesting that Oliver kind of sacrificed. It seems like Oliver actually sacrificed the most, because he gave everything he had to this project. I mean, Joseph and Emma did too, right? They're poor as anything. They're poor as church mice. All right, and so anyway, Isaac Hale does, Isaac gives an affidavit about his experience with Joseph. This is in 1834, and one of the oddities is that Isaac does this affidavit, or he writes a letter first detailing his experience with Joseph, and then people in Ohio, because the church and Joseph are now in Kirtland, they basically say, "Oh, that can't possibly be from Isaac. That's a lie. You're making this up." And so Isaac is really upset about this, and so he goes and he writes out a statement again. He gets people to in the community to witness it. It's sent to a number of papers across the country and published. So this is Isaac Hale's affidavit is really important, not just for the fact that it's there, but the extent that he went to make sure that his experience with Joseph was documented, that it was notarized, that it was witnessed, and that it was distributed, so that people could know. And we'll go through it, and you'll hear the tone, but you can tell Isaac's really trying to be fair. He's not trying to slander Joseph. He's not trying to, he's just trying to state the facts as he knows it. And the witnesses to his statement and witnesses to him as a credible person all basically say, "We've known Isaac for 40 years. He's always been a man of his word. He's been incredibly honest. He is somebody that we rely on for integrity." Those kinds of things, because he really wants to make sure that what he says is being taken seriously, but it's also not with a lot of he's obviously disappointed in Joseph, but he's not trying to slander him. He's just trying to give the facts.
And this is so important that this is included in basically all the church curriculum, right? We've studied these statements since we were kids. We all are aware of them. No, right? You never see this. This is never, ever put out there. Although by the church's own criteria, it's not a late source. It's contemporary. It's witnessed by actual credible people in the community. But again, this is never.
This is a firsthand witness of Joseph and his character.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. Yeah. This should be in all the church curriculum when we study Joseph and the history, because this is a person who had intimate knowledge of him. So, and we should point out, Ganesh, that this picture that we're showing, there is no picture of Isaac Hale, right? Because people might go, "Oh my gosh, Ganesh found a picture." But no, we just found someone of the time, right, Ganesh?
Yeah, just someone of the time that Joseph Isaac was very notable. He was very stately, distinguished, yes. And so that's just just to give you an idea of what he looks like. But
Yeah.
there are no photos at this time in life, and he dies before the photos are invented. So there's nothing really of him. So which is unfortunate because he he actually sounds like such a great guy. I mean,
Yeah.
really level-headed, very
Yeah.
thoughtful, very very caring of his family, and really, just just an all-around very nice person.
And
And
would you
And if
say,
there's,
go ahead, Landon.
well, I was going to say, if there's anyone who would want to be as neutral as possible, here you've got some, you married my daughter. I'm trying to help you out. I knew you before you married my daughter. I knew what kind of person you were. I didn't really like you, but all right, you married my daughter. Now I'm going to try to make the best of this. You're going to be, he actually was the father of one of his grandchild who died right away, but also later they had grandchildren together. So he was the father of his grandchildren. This this is any father can understand that if you're talking about your son-in-law, that you're gonna try to make it work. You're not trying to be deceitful or trying to beat up on the kid. You want him to succeed, and I'm sure Isaac Hale wanted Joseph to succeed, but he certainly saw what he was doing and did not like how is this going to turn out.
Yeah, and I would say for those who aren't aware, when we keep saying married his daughter, it was an elopement.
Yeah.
It was going behind Isaac's back, saying no, we're not going to listen to you. We are going to get married. And that was a pretty big deal back then. But even despite that, he brought them back in for, like you say, Landon, the love of his daughter. But I wonder, before we read this, I mean, I made a joke about this is included in every church curriculum. It's not, but how is Isaac Hale portrayed kind of in curriculum? You just don't hear much about it. Is he vilified kind of? He stood in the way of Emma and Joseph. I mean, I guess if I think back, I'm not really exactly sure how they explain him, or do they just kind of gloss over him?
They just gloss over him. And the only statements are those ones we read earlier, particularly in Joseph Smith History 1, where he's basically saying about his father's family that kind of initially were wary of him because of things, and then protected him. So those are the only statements that we have that kind of are canonized, that are official. So Isaac Hale just doesn't get any mention. It's like Joseph just doesn't want to go there.
Well, we had one of the apostles say, or was it the president that said, don't listen, don't take advice from non-believers.
There you go.
Isaac Hale was a non-believer, therefore he's irrelevant to the story. He never became a member. He never was a member of the church. Therefore, he's just an ancillary figure to the story.
And Joseph never says anything bad about Isaac, which is really interesting. I think that, I mean, even Isaac's statement's not bad about Joseph. It's just, he's trying to put down the facts. But I think, and when we'll talk about it right at the end, that Joseph had a lot of respect for his father. I mean, his father-in-law didn't like him, but it seems like Joseph really respected Isaac. Just the few things that Joseph did. So
I think he was everything his own father was not.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's a really good assessment. Well, Landon, why don't we make you the voice of Isaac? And Isaac. I've split up the affidavit into bite-sized pieces so that we can talk about them. So there's, I think, 6 pieces. But why don't you start us off with this piece?
Okay. This isn't a real picture of Isaac Hale, and this isn't his real voice, but I'll give it my best.
But these are his real words, as published in many newspapers across the United States. He and witnessed by multiple people. So that's pretty credible, even by the church's own standards. There is no reason to ignore this or not include it in any, discussion of Joseph Smith.
I first became acquainted with Joseph Smith Jr. in November 1825. He was at that time in the employ of a set of men who were called money diggers, and his occupation was that of seeing or pretending to see by means of a stone placed in his hat, and his hat closed over his face. In this way he pretended to discover minerals and hidden treasure. His appearance at this time was that of a careless young man, not very well educated, and very saucy and insolent to his father. Smith and his father, with several other money diggers, boarded at my house while they were employed in digging for a mine that they supposed had been opened and worked by the Spaniards many years since. Young Smith gave the money diggers great encouragement at first, but when they had arrived in digging to near the place where he had stated an immense treasure would be found, he said the enchantment was so powerful that he could not see. They then became discouraged and soon after dispersed. This took place about the 17th of November, 1825, and one of the company gave me his note for $12.68 for his board, which is still unpaid.
Yes. All right. So this is the beginning of their story. I think that this, yeah, and you can see why this is not in church manuals, because his occupation was that of seeing or pretending to see by means of a stone placed in his hat and his hat closed over his face. So this is treasure digging. This is this is not just the account that you see in the Joseph Smith history that is in the Pearl of Great Price of him helping with a Spanish silver mine. This is a treasure dig. These are money diggers. This is I like the word enchantment. Like when we're talking about enchantment, we're talking about the folk magic world that Joseph and his father and lots of the people in Western New York are engaging in. These are the beginnings of the church. It's a treasure digging operation that is morphed into this understanding of religiosity.
And using the same means to then translate the Book of Mormon. Of course, none of us growing up knew this story of putting his face in a hat to translate the Book of Mormon. No. But now that you know it, it ties the two together. You can't deny that he's using the exact same method to find treasure from Spaniards as he is to translate Holy Writ.
Yeah, and that's exactly what he then goes on to say. So that's why Isaac's testimony is so important. He links this treasure digging world to the Book of Mormon production world, and says basically it's the same thing.
What caught me here was that he was very saucy and insolent to his father.
Yeah.
You always hear how well he treated his father. So it sounds like he was kind of an insolent teenager, but very saucy. Tells you that that's someone who's not on their best behavior. They tend to talk back and
not respecting elders, which was very important then.
Yeah, and then that last part about the note being unpaid, again, this is something I saw over and over in my reading of John Turner's book, was not paying debts. He would get debts and then he'd take off on them.
Yeah. To be fair, that debt is not necessarily
not
Joseph.
His. Yeah.
But yes, that's a big deal. And I think you're right about the sauciness. There's obviously a conflict there between Joseph and his father, and we don't know what that is, but it was apparent to Isaac. The other thing that comes up quite a bit is, and this is from Brian Hale. Brian Hales often talks about is that Isaac identifies Joseph as not very well educated. This is 1825, so he's just on the cusp of being 20 here. That Joseph is not greatly educated. This is something that stands out for Isaac, particularly because he. Yeah,
I was going to say, don't you think that from Isaac's point of view, educated, him being a prominent person, would be more formally educated? Because Joseph was educated, although perhaps didn't sit in a school very much, but he was educated. But to Isaac, I feel like he would have been talking about, he's not a young man that's been in college. He hasn't been in any higher education. He's just sort of saucy. And the other thing I think that stands out to me is here again, we see something doesn't come to fruition that he predicted or prophesied or saw, and it's something beyond his control. It's, too powerful. God doesn't want it. You weren't faithful. It's not him. It's everything else, and it's out of his control. And that is how he operated the entire way through going forward.
Yeah, that's classic treasure digging lore, right? The idea you can't quite get the treasure because the enchantment, the guardian is too strong. It's whisked away under the ground, and so that's the reason how you can explain the fact that you can't find the treasure.
Yeah, and not very well educated doesn't mean you're not smart.
Right.
It
Yeah.
just
That's what I
means
was
you
trying
haven't
to
gone
say.
to a lot of formal schooling.
Exactly.
And you may talk with an accent that makes you sound like a hick, but you could
Mhm.
still be quite brilliant.
Yeah. And look, he's saying that too, right? He's the one. Joseph is the seer. Joseph is the one that's leading these people, and everybody's listening to what he's saying. So it really gives the understanding that Joseph is kind of calling the shots, which is quite impressive, in that term. I've included his here. It might be a bit long to read, but but it's the Articles of Agreement. So we actually have the agreement around this treasure dig, because Isaac is one of the witnesses to the agreement. So although he doesn't agree with this whole money digging thing, obviously from his statement, he is a witness to it. So it's not just that he's boarding these people; he's actually involved in an overseeing kind of way to what's going on. And maybe Rebecca, do you want to read that for us?
Yeah,
It
this is
just
very
brings up a
interesting.
couple
So
things.
you're saying he was sort of like a notary almost. The diggers,
Correct.
the
Yes.
people who are paying for the dig, they draft this document and they say, can you sign this? Because, can you watch us sign it and sort of, say that, yes, it's all in good order. That's really fascinating. So it's called Articles of Agreement, and it was the 1st of November, 1825. We, the undersigned, do firmly agree, and by these presents bind ourselves to fulfill and abide by the hereafter specified articles. First, that if anything of value should be obtained at a certain place in Pennsylvania near a William Hale's supposed to be valuable mine of either gold or silver, and also to contain coined money and bars or ingots of gold or silver, and at which several hands have been at work during a considerable part of the past summer, we do agree to have it divided in the following manner: vis-a-vis Josiah Stowell, Calvin Stowell, and William Hale to take 2/3. Now, William Hale is a relative of Isaac Hale. Is that right? Is he Emma's?
Yes.
Is he the uncle? I can't remember. Who is he? I mean, this is why they're there.
Yeah. So this is Isaac Hale's brother.
Brother, that's what I thought. He's the uncle of Emma. That's what I thought. Okay, so they will get 2/3, and Charles Newton, William I. Wiley, and the widow Harper to take the other third. And we further agree that Joseph Smith Sr. and Joseph Smith Jr. shall be considered as having 2 shares, 2/11ths of all the property that may be obtained, and the shares to be taken equally from each third. Second, and we further agree that in consideration of the expense and labor to which the following named persons have been at: John F. Shepard, Elihu Stowell, and John Grant, to consider them as equal sharers in the mine after all the coined money and bars or ingots are obtained by the undersigned. They're just delusional, aren't they? I'm sorry. It's just, oh God, it's like little kids in a tree house planning something out.
These people
sorry.
are taking this really seriously.
Yeah, that's
this
what I
not...
mean. Oh my goodness. Oh, I'm just okay. And their shares are to be taken out from each share. And we further agree to remunerate all the 3 above named persons in a handsome manner for all their time, expense, and labor, which they have been or may be at until the mine is opened. If anything should be obtained, otherwise, they are to lose their time and their expense and their labor. So they're basically working for free unless all this amazing stuff pops up out of the ground, and then they're going to get a little piece of it, a little bit. And third, and we further agree that all the expense which has or may accrue until the mine is opened shall be equally borne by the proprietors of each third, and that after the mine is opened, the expense shall be equally borne by each of the sharers. So you have the investors, and then you have the diggers on the ground, and then you have the people that are seeing what is supposed to happen, and everybody gets a little piece of it. a little piece somewhere in there. But yeah, they just think it's so real, don't they? I mean, they just, yeah.
They absolutely do. One of the things that I find fascinating about this too is that we talk about this, and this is in the history of the Joseph Smith's history, that it's a silver mine. But actually, the agreement suggests that it's a gold or silver mine. Like they're expecting gold and silver. So which is common. This whole treasure digging thing is really about gold. Silver is great too, but it's really about gold.
Gold is more romantic, right?
Can
All
you go
those
back
silver is what they were finding.
Can you go back one slide, Ganesh?
Sure.
Okay, state immense treasure. Somewhere in here I've been reading, and I thought it was in here. Oh, work by the Spaniards.
Yes.
So he's told Isaac it was Spaniards. Again, this goes back. I looked it up because I'm going, why would Spaniards have been up in Pennsylvania digging for gold? The Spaniards settled Central America, South America, but they did not settle North America. I just looked up, was there any Spanish gold or treasure mines? And they said, no, that was absolutely just a fictional makeup of people of the time, but there is no historical evidence of any Spanish or Spanish gold and silver mines ever being done in North America. So again, you've got this Spanish gold mines are similar to Nephites and Lamanites. They just don't exist.
Fairy tale. Yep.
Fairy tale. Yep.
It's a fairy tale, but it sounds very romantic, right? The Spanish gold, we're going to find it. Captain Kidd, Lamanite gold. I mean, it sounds amazing.
But Joseph is saying here that there's an enchantment on this Spanish gold. So he's seeing things that never really existed.
Right.
Yeah, but the people believe, right? They
believe it.
They've drafted this article of agreement, which is really specific about who's going to get what and how.
Gold bars, ingot. They even have it listed out the form that it's going to come. I mean, they're expecting any second to pull it out of the ground. It's that real to them.
Just fascinating.
So, and you don't put all this effort and time and labor into something that you don't believe. So these guys believed this, just like, does he believe the Book of Mormon really happened? I don't know. He believed Spanish did gold, had gold mines in the area enough that he spent a lot of time doing it, and wasted a lot of time and money. And I think that's what his father-in-law's upset about is he's going, you're wasting
thinker.
all your time.
Yeah, he's a magical thinker. That's exactly right. I mean, how would you feel, Landon? You have a daughter. If your son-in-law, every time you went over to visit, your daughter was working and your son-in-law had his head in a hat going, I seen something. You would finally just go, oh my gosh, get a job, support my daughter. Landon's son-in-law is not doing that. He's amazing. So
yeah, it's a classic tale, right? Of, deadbeat son. Or deadbeat son-in-law, who's either gaming all day long, or he's on the pokies, or he's gambling. He's just about to strike it rich, and this will be and you're just looking at it like you're watching a train wreck. You know that this is going to end badly.
But
you don't want to have anything to do with it.
This is so contrary to what we learned growing up. Joseph was a hard-working. You always, every church movie always started out with him pulling logs out of the ground and cutting wood and plowing the fields. And in reality, we know, his own father-in-law is going, you're a deadbeat loser. You need to get out of my house because you're not contributing.
Yeah, no, that's not the video.
Bring us to part 2. Landon, do you want to give us the next bit of his?
After these occurrences, young Smith made several visits at my house and at length asked my consent to his marrying my daughter, Emma. This I refused and gave my reason for so doing, some of which were that he was a stranger and followed a business that I could not approve. He then left the place. Not long after this, he returned, and while I was absent from home, carried off my daughter into the state of New York, where they were married without my approbation or consent. After they had arrived at Palmyra, New York, Emma wrote to me inquiring whether she could have her property consisting of clothing, furniture, cows, etc. I replied that her property was safe and at her disposal. In a short time they returned, bringing with them a Peter Ingersoll, and subsequently came to the conclusion that they would move out and reside upon a place near my residence.
Who is Peter
Yeah.
Ingersoll? Should
So
I know that name?
Peter Ingersoll. So Peter Ingersoll was a friend of the Smiths in Palmyra, or actually a neighbor in just next door, and he transported the
Oh,
couple to
that's right.
come get
That's right.
Joseph's gear. We're going to hear from him in just a second. In fact, maybe we can do that now. So this is Peter Ingersoll's affidavit. And why don't you read that for us, Rebecca? So we have Isaac Hale's relating the story about reconnecting with Emma, and we have Peter Ingersoll's version of it too.
Yeah, and I have to say that if you go back when Joseph said, "I want to marry your daughter," Isaac's like, "Absolutely not," and that should have been respected. Those were the social norms of the day, and what they did, eloping, that was a big deal. I mean, that was a huge disrespect, and that could have been a reason that Isaac could say, "You're dead to me. I have nothing to do with you ever again. You completely went against my wishes." But he didn't, which shows me he's a loving father. He's trying to work with this, and he loves his daughter. But I think he also saw her threw away all her chance. She was raised well. She was well bred. She was educated. She had the chance to be someone else. And, of course, we never would have heard of her had she done that. She just would have lived her life. So anyway, okay. So Peter Ingersoll, affidavit, 1833. Again, these are all contemporary. The church is obsessed with contemporary sources. They poo-poo and slam down things that are late. Why are none of these ever introduced into the curriculum? I guess we'll find out. In the month of August, 1827, I was hired by Joseph Smith Jr. to go to Pennsylvania to move his wife's household furniture up to Manchester, where his wife then was. When we arrived at Mr. Isaac Hale's in Harmony, Pennsylvania, from which place he had taken his wife, a scene presented itself, truly affecting. So, I don't think I realized this. Emma stayed put. Joseph went down to get all of her stuff and take it back. That's interesting. Okay. His father-in-law, Mr. Hale, addressed Joseph in a flood of tears. "You have stolen my daughter and married her. I had much rather have followed her to her grave. You spent your time in digging for money, pretend to see in a stone, and thus try to deceive people." Joseph wept and acknowledged he could not see in a stone now, nor never could, and that his former pretensions in that respect were all false. He then promised to give up his old habits of digging for money and looking into stones. Mr. Hale told Joseph if he would move to Pennsylvania and work for a living, he would assist him in getting into business. Joseph acceded to this proposition. Joseph told me on his return that he intended to keep the promise which he had made his father-in-law, but he said, "It will be hard for me, for they will all oppose, as they want me to look in the stone for them to dig money." And in fact, it was as he predicted. Oh, that's kind of heartbreaking, isn't it? I mean, you can just say, "Why, Joseph? Why did you do this? I'm sorry." And then he's like, look, okay, come back, bring my daughter. I'm going to help you. You still have a chance. I can prop you up with my reputation. I can help you. Just don't do that weird stuff anymore. And Joseph's like, "Sure." But then he's like, people want me to do it though. But it's not my fault.
Peter doesn't sound like someone who's antagonistic about Joseph. He's simply stating facts, and he even said, "Yeah." And when he went back down there, everyone wanted him to look in his hat again. It was just as he said. And this was a neighbor who was willing to go and help move stuff back. I mean, he got paid for it, but he seemed willing to go all the way to Pennsylvania to help move the person back. So, why did Peter Ingersoll write an affidavit in 1833?
Oh, good question.
What was the?
Oh, so this is all part of the Hurlbut affidavits.
Okay.
So Philastrus Hurlbut had been a member of the church, got disaffected with Joseph, and he was like, this doesn't make sense. And so he went back to Palmyra and Manchester, and he collected a whole lot of affidavits. And Peter Ingersoll is a neighbor, close neighbor and friend of the Smiths. And Peter Ingersoll gave a really great he's another one that's kind of a witness. He's not he's not down on the Smiths or anything. He just kind of like, I like them. I just, they're just weird,
Yeah.
uh, um, and they do stuff which I don't agree with, but I, I like them. So, Peter Ingersoll gives a really, uh, what's the word, neutral but accurate, affidavit. And we could do the same thing that we're doing with Isaac's affidavit with Peter Ingersoll's one, because A, they corroborate, but also, Peter Ingersoll gives a very fair assessment of the family too, which I think is really important. And it goes to show, I mean, and Rebecca, you kind of alluded to this earlier, that everybody who was did not believe in the Smiths are kind of counted as enemies and dissuaded. But you can tell from even Isaac's statement and Peter Ingersoll's statement, there were people who were fairly neutral. They like, the Smiths. Didn't believe everything they said, but I like them as people. That kind of a
Yeah.
a feeling. I don't mean them ill or anything like that.
Yeah.
They just were a bit odd. So, but of course, they tell story. They tell a version of the Smiths and a version of Joseph that is quite different than the polished, prophetic narrative that has been given, in the church circles. And so their testimonies undermine that narrative, so they're never discussed.
What do apologists say about things like this?
They try to lump them in with the kind of more mean-spirited.
Oh, okay. The sensational, the obvious anti things that are
yeah.
said. Yeah, but you can't really hear. I mean, it's respectful. It's just sort of an account. So
Yeah,
interesting.
but it gives some interesting perspectives from Peter Ingersoll's, witness. That Isaac's saying, "You've stolen my daughter." There's a depth of gravity about that kind of reconciliation of, this is horrible, and you've taken away somebody that's precious to me, and you're doing something that you're deceiving people, and that's just not something that I can stand.
The interesting thing here, Joseph actually admitted, yeah, I can't see anything in the stone. So
yeah, that's why this affidavit's never used to go, oh,
yeah,
I can see why. Yeah.
see why. This is kind of supporting these kind of ideas. This is Hale Lewis, who is a cousin. This is a later reminiscence, but it's kind of really, I think, quite fabulous. He writes, the Hale family was greatly exacerbated by Joseph and Emma's elopement, and perhaps it would not have been safe for Smith to have shown himself at his father-in-law's house. Emma was or had been the idol or favorite of the family, and they all still felt a strong attachment for her. And the permission to return and reconciliation was effected and accomplished by her and perhaps her sister, Mrs. Elizabeth Wassam, who lived near Bainbridge, New York. The permission for Smith to return all came from the other side, not from Mr. Isaac Hale or his family in Harmony, Pennsylvania.
Interesting.
So that's really interesting, the idea that Emma and her sister, tried to smooth over this rift that Joseph had created by, basically stealing Isaac's daughter. And I just wanted to put in here, because you know how I love those little autobiographical things with regard to Joseph in the Book of Mormon. And this is from Mosiah chapter 23, verse 33. And it came to pass that Amulon did plead with the Lamanites, and he also sent forth their wives, who were the daughters of the Lamanites, to plead with their brethren that they should not destroy their husbands. And the Lamanites had compassion on Amulon and his brethren, and did not destroy them because of their wives. Amulon was one of the priests of Noah, and they'd stolen the daughters of the Lamanites, and those daughters then, now wives, who loved their husbands, were now, establishing a reconciliation. So you see this very interesting and
He's
parallel between.
combining his own life with the Sabine women's story,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and came up with this. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it's I think it's quite cute. But the fact that we have in the historic record the idea that these things are actually happening to Joseph is really interesting, isn't it? All right, part three. Isaac Landon.
Smith stated to me that he had given up what he called glass looking and that he expected to work hard for a living and was willing to do so. He also made arrangements with my son Alva Hale to go to Palmyra and move his, Smith's, furniture, etc. to this place. He then returned to Palmyra, and soon after, Alva, agreeable to the arrangement, went up and returned with Smith and his family. Soon after this, I was informed they had brought a wonderful book of plates down with them. I was shown a box which it is said they were contained, which had, to all appearances, been used as a glass box of the common-sized window glass. I was allowed to feel the weight of the box, and they gave me to understand that the book of plates was then in the box, into which, however, I was not allowed to look. I inquired of Joseph Smith, Jr., who was to be the first who would be allowed to see the book of plates. He said it was a young child. After this, I became dissatisfied and informed him that if there was anything in my house of that description which I could not be allowed to see, he must take it away. If he did not, I was determined to see it. After that, the plates were said to be hid in the woods.
What is a glass box of the common size of window glass?
So it's I guess it's basically a box that holds glass, because if you're a glazier and you're going to put we can probably see them.
We've seen the box. It's at the Church History Museum.
Yeah, but that's not the box. There's no way that box works. And this describes something different. To me, this is like a flat box that would contain maybe panes of glass,
Correct,
that are transported. So that's to me what that says. That box at the Church History, I think we all know that one, there's no way that it would close on the rings and the thickness of the plates. But I love that. If I can't see inside it, you can't have it in my house. I like Isaac Hale. He's very practical.
He's very practical. And you can see that, like if you're looking at this house, the little cottage, you can see that the windows are made up of panes, the little panes. They're, maybe that big. So this is a box that basically can hold a number of panes, because if you're a glazier and you're trying to transport panes of glass without them smashing, you're going to want to, bring a whole lot of panes in order to, make your window, because your window is probably made up of, in these cases, it's made up of like 12 to 15 panes to give yourself a big enough window to be able to stare out of.
Are they saying that the box that they have on display in the Church History Museum that Landon described is a box used to transfer? That is this box that Isaac?
Well, I thought someone made that box that was at the Church History Museum. He's just saying it looked like that kind of box. He didn't necessarily say it was that type of box.
I think it was that box. I think Joseph just found it. Oh, here's a box. This will do.
Because I thought that was the box he kept the plates in, is what they said at the Church History Museum. So.
Right. But then everybody that looked at the plates and measured what the plates would be, so there's no way the lid could close if they were in that box. So yeah, it's confusing. There were probably a series of boxes. Honestly, he probably showed different people and said, "Ooh, it's under here. It's in here."
It's in here. Yeah, that's right. And it's interesting that, well, there's two parts that I think are quite interesting. One is that, there's only a box, right? And it's sealed or locked so that nobody can see inside it, because part of the thing is that nobody's allowed to see. These are, they're special, but they've been given as a charge. Nobody can see this. And I think that's something that we just gloss over in the church. We talk about how the plates are always available and stuff. They're not. Nobody can see them. They're not allowed to see them. They're kept in a box, and as Isaac testified, they're put in the woods, so they're even kept safe away from prying eyes, somewhere hid. So
who's the young child that he's saying can see them?
The young child is another interesting thing, is that Joseph and Emma are pregnant. This is the end of November, when they come to the Hale residence, maybe into December of 1827. Their child is born on the 15th of June 1828. He dies soon afterwards, so that's a real tragedy to the Smiths. But the gestation date puts the conception on the 21st, 22nd of September, 1827. So Joseph and Emma have gone to the Hill Cumorah to retrieve the treasure. And as part of that bit of privacy, along with the buggy of Josiah Stoll and Joseph Knight Sr., that's where the child has been conceived.
On the Hill Cumorah? In the buggy?
In the buggy, or on the ground.
That night in the buggy. That should be the title of the article. Wait, does everyone know this? I swear, I thought I knew a lot. I've missed this. So do you think that this was part of his idea of all the ritual and ceremony around it? The black buggy, the black horse, the black braiding, and then Emma's dressed in black, he's dressed in black. They have to have sex.
Which would explain why he took Emma with him. Well, I guess the treasure angel said he had to bring someone with him.
And he says specifically Emma. There are other accounts where that's why he married Emma, because she was the one that he was supposed to bring with her. But no, we've never heard this, Ganesh. This may have to be the title of the thumbnail. There was sex involved in retrieving the plates. Of course there was. Oh my gosh.
There absolutely was. So if you really want to celebrate Moroni Day, so on the 21st.
Was Moroni watching? Oh my God.
This is.
Yes. So yes, the child, the conception of the child, part of this was miraculous. It's part of the treasure digging law. It's part of the acquisition of the plates. It's part of the whole kind of the reason that they could get it when previously they hadn't been able to get it. And so the child is special. The child is
like a blessed child, like a And think about that. I mean, this is his magic tradition. He's doing it, on the 21st. Everything's aligned. It's his special day. And so, of course, he has to arrange to conceive a child on that day that will be a blessed, special child.
But the child dies, right?
Yeah, well,
but the child dies.
Everything always goes wrong, unfortunately.
What's the plan, right? So that this storyline, the idea that the child is special, that the child will be the one who opens up the portal or the knowledge or anything like that dies. So that storyline finishes. That doesn't go anywhere. But yeah, it's a really big deal. It's part of the whole kind of folklore. It's part of the thing that Isaac Hale becomes aware of, that this special child, this pregnancy is going to be part of this whole coming forth of this record, or this treasure, or this information. Because remember, we're talking prior to this becoming a narrative, so this is we just don't know. But we have other accounts of this too. But it's I was going to say about Joseph and Emma. They're living in the Smith home, in the frame home. There's lots of children around. There's the parents there too. There's not a lot of privacy at the frame house. And there's not a lot of privacy after Joseph has apparently got plates, because then everybody's trying to, bust in and mob them and things like that. This is a rare moment of privacy for the couple. On the hill, they're away from everybody else. They've got a buggy. This is,
But we've seen that hill. There's not a lot of privacy. It's not wooded like it is now, or like they forested it in the early 1900s. I mean, those pictures, you can stand in the town and go, buggy rocking.
Of course, it's the middle of the night, but it's
the middle of the night.
It does give a whole new meaning
sound
to getting buggy.
This is just, I'm not going to be able to recover from this part. I can't be serious going forward.
If the buggy's knocking, if the buggy's rocking, don't come a knocking.
Don't come a knocking, Moroni. We're talking to you. You stay out. Oh my God.
Wow. But yeah, this is a really important part of the story. It just doesn't, because the child dies, it doesn't become a big part of the story, right? It's a storyline that dies. Yeah.
No, and it's sort of like a mythical arc, right? The young child, specially conceived like a Jesus, right? And then a special mission, bringing something forth. testifying of this Book of Mormon. I can see where this would have gone
Well, and
if the
being
child would have
born,
lived.
being born to Joseph, who was a special child
Right,
born
the
with a call
yeah,
and all
yeah.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, they were all
Yeah,
about
these-
that special birth sign. So, I can totally see this would have been the narrative if the child hadn't have died. So interesting.
and these are the kinds of stories that Joseph is telling in Harmony, Pennsylvania. This is why the Hales and the cousins, the Lewises, are all kind of going, "What the heck are you talking about? And you're weird, but you also, Rebecca, do you want to read these for us? There's a couple of cousin reminiscences.
Okay, so these are, and so this is the other side of the Hale family. Is that right? The Lewises?
Yeah. So this is these are Emma's
The
cousins.
wife's relatives,
So this is,
the cousins.
yeah.
Okay. So this is Sophia Lewis in 1834. She states that she heard Smith say the book of plates could not be opened under penalty of death by any other person but his, Smith's, firstborn, which was to be a male. She said she was present at the birth of his child and that it was stillborn and very much deformed.
And
So there goes
wasn't it
that
female
story.
also? I thought it was a female.
No, it was a boy.
It was
A
a
boy.
little
It was a
boy.
boy?
At the time.
Okay.
Yeah, it was a little boy. Wow. So he really was telling that story. And again, that was folk magic, and religious people in the town are going to go, this guy's out there. This is not what we really believe. So my goodness.
This is not Western New York, right?
Yeah.
With
Where
a
that was
whole lot of
okay.
New England. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a good point. And we've talked about that on podcasts before. The folk magic kind of stuff, that would fly in New York, but you're in Pennsylvania where you got the solid Methodism going there, and this kind of stuff, it makes you look like very low, very, like you said, weird. Yeah. Okay. Joseph and Hale Lewis, this is a late account, 1879. In all his narrative about the acquisition, there was not one word about visions of God or of angels or heavenly revelations. All his information was by that dream and that bleeding ghost. Ooh, there we go. And that is something that we've recently been reminded of or made more aware of when we talk about the Joseph Smith Sr. interview, that was published later, but happened at the day where Moroni was a treasure guardian who had been murdered and put with the treasure, and he was covered with blood when he first visited Joseph. So how interesting that somebody who's talking to Joseph back in the day calls it a bleeding ghost. Joseph Sr. calls it a bleeding ghost. Is that another narrative that would have been there had it not been like really unpopular and weird? So, wow. The heavenly visions and messages of angels, etc., contained in Mormon books were afterthoughts revised to order. And of course, we all say that. I always make that joke. And then a treasure guardian, oh, sorry. And then an angel of the Lord. You just kind of have to give the people what they want, right? So the moving of Smith from York State to Harmony, Pennsylvania has been stated by Mr. Hale. And while Smith was in Harmony, Pennsylvania, translating his book, he made the above statements in our presence to Reverend Nathaniel Lewis. It was here also that he joined the Methodist Episcopal Church. He presented himself in a very serious and humble manner, and the minister, not suspecting evil, put his name on the class book. In the absence of some of the official members, among whom was the undersigned, Joseph Lewis, who, when he learned what was done, he took with him Joshua McCune and talked with Smith. They told him plainly that such a character as he was a disgrace to the church, that he could not be a member of the church unless he broke off his sins by repentance, made public confession, renounced his fraudulent and hypocritical practices. There it is. They're having none of it. His weird, old-timey, folksy, folk magic-y, ritual, bleeding angels, sex in a carriage. I sound like I'm doing something from a Christmas, vacation. But you know what I'm saying? They're like, no, you're not going to be in our church. This is who you are. Renounce it, or no, it's not going to happen.
Yeah, and this seems to indicate around about August of 1829, 1828, Joseph has lost his newborn child. He's lost the manuscript. He's feeling incredibly, just beaten down, and he's trying to join the Methodist Church. and the cousins are basically saying, "Look, you've been telling these stories. You need to repent. If you're going to join us, you need to you need to repent from these terrible stories you've been telling, these treasure digging things, because that's not Christian at all, and you're just being a hypocrite." Like. Yeah,
But
okay.
Ganesh, wasn't Joseph told in 1820 when he had his first vision that he must join none of them? The sects were all evil and that he was to
Yeah.
join none of them?
Mhm.
Well, that story hasn't come up in the historic record yet. So,
Yes.
um,
Don't get
Seems to
that
be
cart
another
before the
backdated
horse.
story. Yeah.
That's right.
yeah, yeah.
Don't get that cart before the horse. No, that's not happening. So, oh
And as you've rightly pointed out there, Landon, this is why this account is not, in church sources, right? Because it just undermines the whole first vision narrative.
And we actually have the records of the church where he joined, I believe. Uh, is it
Yeah, I
just a
don't know that.
story, or I thought someone had where he'd actually signed the rolls or whatever?
I don't know that we actually have a piece of paper.
Okay.
Not that I've
but
seen,
doesn't
but
the
we,
church admit that he did join the
yeah,
Methodists? They
yeah,
do. They have
yeah. I
a
think it's
workaround. They have an apologetic for it.
it's a uh pretty substantiated story.
Right.
It's interesting too that this is in Harmony, Pennsylvania. They often talk about Joseph doing a debating club with the Methodists in Palmyra. So he's kind of around the Methodists, and he's he's uh, partial to them. I think that uh, one of the you know Isaac's a Methodist. Actually, back when he says um, when Isaac says about Joseph asking for Emma's hand in marriage, that he was a stranger and he followed a business that I could not approve of. When he's saying that he's a stranger, he's saying, look, you're not of the same um, religion, you're not of the same culture as us.
Mm.
He's really pointing towards that Methodist idea, and that he's a money digger. It's just not a profession that Isaac can. So when Joseph is trying to endear himself to his father-in-law and distance himself from this money digging, he's also hoping that he's going to get in with his family by ingratiating himself with the Methodists. And
And
of
his
course,
mother, Lucy Mack, right, was raised Methodist and connected to
no, she
Methodism.
wasn't
No, she
raised
wasn't.
Methodist. She was congregational. She was raised
Oh, she was
kind of
congregational. That's right.
congregational,
That's
but then
right.
she
That's right.
joined the Presbyterian Church
That's right.
in
Okay.
1824.
That's right.
So, and of course, this whole idea of being rejected by churches or cast out by churches becomes a really dominant narrative in the Book of Mormon. The idea that um, you know you might be righteous, but those haughty people who are actually in organized religion, they are they are evil, and they're going to cast you out, and they're not going to give you, support, and they're not going to support the poor, and you've got rags on, so you're not welcome in their church. That kind of thing. This is
And how ironic that his church that he formed excommunicated everybody and their dog at the drop of a hat, right? You're
yeah.
excommunicated. No, and continues to do that. So that's kind of ironic.
All right, Landon.
Okay. About this time, Martin Harris made his appearance upon the stage, and Smith began to interpret the characters or hieroglyphics which he said were engraven upon the plates, while Harris wrote down the interpretation. It was said that Harris wrote down 116 pages and lost them. Soon after this happened, Martin Harris informed me that he must have a greater witness, and said that he had talked with Joseph about it. Joseph informed him that he could not or durst not show him the plates, but that he, Joseph, would go into the woods where the book of plates was, and that after he came back, Harris should follow his tracks in the snow and find the book and examine it for himself. Harris informed me afterwards that he followed Smith's directions and could not find the plates and was still dissatisfied.
What kind of games are these? Come on.
This is such an interesting story. I mean, Isaac's going, you know, So what Isaac's talking about, and the great thing is that we have this corroborated, right? Because this is Doctrine and Covenants section 5. Martin comes back to Harmony, Pennsylvania in March of 1829, and he's like, I have to see them, Joseph. I've got to see the plates. I need to know that this is the work. And basically Joseph gets this revelation that Martin's not allowed to see the plates. So one of the great things about this, of course, is that it establishes the fact that Martin never sees the plates. He's the scribe for 2 months in April to June of 1828, and he never sees the plates. The plates are not part of the Book of Mormon production at all. This is the story where Martin puts a stone, takes a stone that they're from the riverbank and puts it in the hat and tries to see if Joseph is just tricking him on it. And Joseph goes, "Oh, I can't see anything, Martin. It's all dark."
I can just see Joseph tracking through the woods, making this track, and he's walking all over the woods, and then he comes back to the cabin, and Emma comes up and Joseph's just laughing, and she's like, what's happening, Joseph? And he points out to Martin Harris, who's out there digging in the snow, trying to find these plates that he just walked through the woods, trying to give him a path to follow. And he's got to be just laughing at him while he's out there trying to find him.
Yeah.
Yeah, he sent him on a treasure dig, didn't he?
Yeah.
It was not successful.
And the other thing about that is that Joseph has got this divine command. We know this because this is in Doctrine and Covenants section 5 too, that he's not to show them to anybody. So he kind of gets around this command by going, well, I'll walk out into the snow. You can follow my tracks. And if God then determines that you are worthy enough to see the plates, then God will provide you a way to be able to find them. So it's not me, it's God. Yeah. And of course, then when he comes back and he hasn't found them, then God, Joseph can say, oh, well, according to Doctrine and Covenants section 5, this revelation, God doesn't want you to see the plates. You need to have faith, Martin. It's time for you to, so it's a really interesting trick, dynamic, the way that Joseph is manipulating Martin into making him feel like it's his fault that he hasn't discovered this treasure because he's not righteous enough. If he was, then God would have revealed it to him. And, the Doctrine and Covenants section 5 confirms this.
Yeah, and he uses that throughout. It's not me, it's you. You're not righteous enough, or God doesn't want you to, or you didn't have faith. And it's not just Joseph Smith. That is baked into Mormonism throughout, that it's you. If you have a problem, or you see something different, or, you don't believe this, you are the one that needs to work on it. And it works. It's a great tactic. It absolutely works to make a person raised in that feel terrible and like it's their fault.
And Isaac, in this particular part of the statement, Isaac's seeing this. He's watching this happen. Yeah. He's describing it, and he knows what Joseph is doing. That Joseph is manipulating Martin. I mean, Martin's lived effectively next door to the Hales for a big part of 1828. These men are similar age, and Martin's around about the same age as Joseph Smith's father, so just a little bit younger than Isaac. They've talked quite a bit because they're neighbors and they have to. So Isaac knows Martin really well. It's not just that he's hid away in the cabin and it's never talks to him. These are big interactions that Isaac is having with these people. He knows these people better than they know themselves. He knows that Martin is getting played, and yet he's kind of, this is why Joseph, he just does not trust Joseph. He's like, this is terrible, and my hands are tied,
But look how interesting, because the narrative we always have is the Martin's wife, right? She was the one that didn't believe. Martin believed the whole time, but to appease his wife, who was just horrible, he had to get the plates. Or he had to, show her some kind of evidence or the pages. But look at this. Here it says, Isaac Hale is saying, my neighbor, my friend said, I don't know if I believe this. I need some more proof. So it's Martin Harris himself. It's always pushed off to the wife, not one of the witnesses, but, it's always pushed off to the wife. And here it's Martin himself saying, I don't know. I'm just not sure about what I'm doing.
And this is the second time Isaac's seen this, because the first time the gold digger company was there and Joseph was telling him, oh, there's a treasure and you'll find it and you'll look here and you know, now here comes a completely different person. And now he's being told, oh, there's gold and it's hidden and you're going to find it. And at this point, Isaac's got to be just going, oh, brother.
Yeah.
Oh, this is who my daughter married. What was she thinking?
You can see why by the beginning of 1829, Isaac is like, I just don't want to have anything to do with us. Get out,
Yep.
you know, go. You know, like I used to be a respected person in this community. Now I'm a laughing stock.
Yeah, and Emma, we love you, but you got to make a choice, and you choose Joseph, you'll probably end up with 37 sister wives. I mean, he's got to have never thought that would happen.
No. Who could have thought it would have gone there? But I also think, you know, his reputation, how many of his neighbors did give Joseph a little bit more, you know, of wiggle room just because of who he's associated with, right? And so he must have felt horrible about that people are being duped and manipulated simply because, you know, Joseph is like, yeah, look, I'm with the Hale family. You know them, right? Isn't that how door-to-door sales work? They come to your door and they're like, hey, I just sold windows to your neighbor down the block.
Exactly.
Oh, yeah. Why don't we continue with the same story about Martin, because it just gets worse.
Okay. The next day after this happened, I went to the house where Joseph Smith Jr. lived and where he and Harris were engaged in their translation of the book. Each of them had a written piece of paper which they were comparing, and some of the words were, my servant seeketh a greater witness, but no greater witness can be given him. There was also something said about 3 that were to see the thing, meaning, I suppose, the book of plates, and that if the 3 did not go exactly according to orders, the thing would be taken from them.
Of course.
I inquired I inquired whose words they were, and was informed by Joseph or Emma, I rather think it was the former, that they were the words of Jesus Christ. I told them then that I considered the whole of it a delusion and advised them to abandon it. The manner in which he pretended to read and interpret was the same as when he looked for the money diggers with the stone in his hat and his hat over his face, while the book of plates were at the same time hid in the woods. So he's saying they didn't even have the plates. They're buried in the woods.
And it's the same. And this affidavit has been around forever. And when we grew up, we knew nothing of this. We didn't know the stone. We didn't know the hat. We didn't know the treasure digging. But here's Emma's own father laying it out there. And they've had this forever.
Yeah.
And look, this is damning. This right here is extremely damning. And Isaac saw it all. He's doing the same thing he did here, only now he has a religious, and I can just see him when he goes, well, who is it? This is Jesus. He's probably like, okay, that's it. That you two are crazy. What do you mean it's Jesus Christ? Get out. You know,
Yep.
I mean, there's only so much you can take. And I'm sure if he said here, he didn't remember if it was Emma or Joseph that said it was Jesus. Just the idea that now his daughter possibly would be talking in that kind of language and be so bought in. I think he probably had to say, she's gone. I can't do anything. You know, it's too much. She's with him. I can't.
Yeah.
How sad for him. You know,
I have to step back and go, if you look at this neutrally from the outside, which story seems to make more sense here?
And has
Isaac Hale's story of what happened, or Joseph's story of angels giving him books, the gold, and that he's translating in a hat and writing a book? I mean, I read Isaac's and I'm going, I can see the story here. I can see exactly how this all
There's
unfolded.
Continuity.
It makes sense. Yeah. Yeah. Interesting.
And he's corroborating this, right? Because we can see this. This is Doctrine and Covenants section 5. We have the text of that revelation. So he's pointed to something that's actually tangible, and he's quoting it, you know, with some reliability. It's totally what's going on, you know. Yeah, and interesting too, if you look at those revelations in the early Doctrine and Covenants. So Doctrine and Covenants 3 is kind of the statement Doctrine and Covenants 4 to Joseph Smith Sr. In February of 1829 is also kind of a bit of a statement. But Doctrine and Covenants 5 is kind of like is from the Lord, So Joseph is changing even just in the revelations that he's giving these kinds of it's progressing to the point where actually God's giving me these revelations, and it's Jesus Christ speaking. Like it's a real. You can see a little bit of an evolution there because, and gosh, I think you're absolutely right, Rebecca. Just Isaac is just exacerbated.
Yeah,
What
you can tell that.
We've now got God giving you revelations. This was a book. Now it's
isn't that interesting? I think maybe this is the moment, where they sort of officially then, I know they were saying that to Martin all the time, but this is our new narrative. We're seeing it in action. It's now not, treasure. It's angels, God, it's religious. And I think that was too much. It was too far.
Yeah. And Isaac is this important witness too, that this is the same as when he was a money digger, right? This is the same. This is the big link between, the 1825, what's happening in his house with these money diggers, and now again, what is happening in his house in 1829 with these money diggers who are now presenting themselves as Christian because they're now talking to Jesus.
It's too much, too far.
Too much.
Wow.
We don't have to read this, but it's just Doctrine and Covenants section 5, and I tried to link the passages in Doctrine and Covenants section 25 with the things that Isaac is saying in those statements, and they come up, the same. So you can see that Isaac is presenting this very fairly, very clearly, and incredibly, with amazing amount of accuracy. So.
I'm so curious, and I wish I would have dug into this ahead of time. What do the apologists say about this? It's so incredibly damning, and it has such continuity, and it's so accurate, and it's so corroborated. I mean, I guess I'm going to have to look into it afterwards, but what do they say about this? How do you wiggle out from under this?
Isaac Hale is an anti. He, don't regard what he says.
Wow.
All right, Landon, why don't you do I think this is the last part. Yeah.
After this, Martin Harris went away, and Oliver Cowdery came and wrote for Smith, while he interpreted as above described. This is the same Oliver Cowdery whose name may be found in the Book of Mormon. Cowdery continued as scribe for Smith until the Book of Mormon was completed, as I supposed and understood. Joseph Smith Jr. resided near me for some time after this, and I had a good opportunity of becoming acquainted with him, and somewhat acquainted with his associates, and I conscientiously believe from the facts I have detailed, and from many other circumstances which I do not deem it necessary to relate, that the whole Book of Mormon, so called, is a silly fabrication of falsehood and wickedness got up for speculation and with a design to dupe the credulous and unwary, and in order that its fabrication might live upon the spoils of those who swallowed the deception.
Yeah, that's his assessment of the situation. And he's not being mean or anything. He's just kind of being, this is matter of fact. This is a fabrication. It's a fabrication I witnessed in process. Like I saw it, with multiple people, Martin Harris and Oliver Cowdery. I was in their house, like it's not like he's estranged from the family. He's visiting his daughter. He's coming into the house. They're neighbors. This is this is just his lived day-to-day experience with Joseph and his scribes. So this is something he's saying.
This was one thing Rebecca and I, when we went to Independence and we're talking about this is one of the things we came down to is, everyone wants to talk about the three witnesses and how do you discredit the three witnesses and how can we disregard that three men, had this vision. But the bottom line is those men, if they were witnesses of the plates, more than anything, they were also witnesses of Joseph's character. They lived with him. They moved with him. They spent years with him. And one thing you can say, oh, they never denied their witness of the Book of Mormon. Well, also, none of these three and Isaac Hale now, none of these four men who know Joseph very, very well, they all came to the same conclusion that he was a fraud, that he was a false prophet, that he was a fallen man, and that that he was not trustworthy. And none of them reacquainted themselves with Joseph Smith and continued to follow him. They all left him. Some were kicked out, but they all, on their own volition, after being called horrible names by Joseph, being extremely spirited to everyone, they all bear witness that this man was not a good person. And you can't sit and say, well, how do you dismiss the witnesses when they say the Book of Mormon is that they believe that Joseph translated the Book of Mormon, but we don't believe them when they say he was a horrible human being.
Yeah.
Well, they don't bring that part up. They don't bring up the part that, yes, they kept proclaiming for the Book of Mormon, but that had to do with livelihood and money, and the only thing that they could do, but that all of them still continue to say, yeah, Joseph, no, not so much. So Isaac really is the first witness, isn't he? He really is. I say bring Isaac back again. We need to start a campaign. I am not kidding. And I feel like the second paragraph here, you know how you go to a hotel and you find a Book of Mormon and people always write CES letter or something. I want to print these out and just say, here's a testimony from the time, and just stick it in there on that first page of the Book of Mormon. I mean, this says it so clearly. And I have to feel like if he really was in such intimate, circumstances and connection with everything going on over at Joseph's house, he probably overheard some things. You know what I mean? He probably overheard some of them working stuff out. He overheard Joseph, being manipulative, whatever he was doing, overbearing, whether they were in on it or not. I'm sure he saw how the sausage was made a little bit. And here's the statement. He's like, a silly fabrication. And I do the more I study and read, it's like kids in a treehouse playing church, as Brad Wilcox says. They're making up this incredible story, whether or not they really convince themselves that they believe it. I think that may be the case. But yeah, a silly fabrication.
And to me, just as strong as the three witnesses who saw the plates, we have to consider the witnesses who were all around the plates and never saw them.
Yeah.
And gave a witness that I never saw them, even though they were at my house, they were on my kitchen table. I sat directly across from Joseph behind a sheet and I never saw them. Someone should have seen these plates, and not when all of this stuff is happening. They're transporting them, covering them up, and yet Emma never sees them. She was with them multiple times, never sees them. Her father never sees them. The only people who see them all come from the same two families. And the three who say they saw them with an angel had financial gain, hopefully, in it by the sale of the book.
Yeah. It's incredible. And this, Isaac, gosh, what a powerful witness. I think we need to consider. Big. I just want to, just in kind of closing and kind of fleshing out some of the things, we have a couple of reminiscences from Joseph Knight Sr. So he's a friend of the family. He's a believer, and he is instrumental in the project. He lives in nearby South Bainbridge, Colesville. He's providing means to the family while the Book of Mormon is in production in Harmony. And he just I wonder if you can read them, Rebecca, and just give us a couple of ideas about what's going on around, all of this.
Right. So this is Joseph Knight Sr. It's his account between 1835 and 1847. He says about Joseph being poor in the winter of 1828. Now he could not translate but little, being poor and nobody to write for him. But his wife and she, nobody to write for him but his wife, and she could not do much and take care of her house. And he being poor and no means to live, but work, his wife's father and family were all against him and would not help him. He and his wife came up to see me the first of the winter in 1828 and told me his case, but I was not in easy circumstances and I did not know what it might amount to, and my wife and family all against me about helping him. Nobody wanted to help, but I let him have some little provisions and some few things out of the store, a pair of shoes and $3 in money to help him a little. So they were absolutely destitute, weren't they? They were, because, when you won't work, but instead, you won't try to get money the way other people are, you're doing this, you have nothing. You're just begging. He goes on to say about how poor Oliver and Joseph were during the dictation in harmony. Now, Joseph and Oliver came up to see me if I could help him to some provisions, having no way to buy any. Joseph and Oliver were gone to see if they could find a place to work for provisions, but found none. So they were in the worst of circumstances.
They really needed a benefactor, and and after Martin Harris was the benefactor in 1828, but he's now off the scene because he's lost the manuscript, right? Effectively, Joseph Knight Sr. is a bit of the benefactor. He's making sure that they're kind of not starving. Oliver's come with his money from his schoolhouse, but that's all been put towards the mortgage on the farm, because the Hales are not. Joseph originally promised that he would come down to Harmony, he would work a farm. Mm-hmm. Isaac would help him get into business, get him sorted. But of course, he used that time to, work on the Book of Mormon with Martin Harris. And so when these are farming families, they need to work hard so that they can eat during the winter. And I think the Hales were exacerbated by the fact that they'd worked on this, but also they were kind of a bit of tough love. You guys, didn't do what you said you were going to do, and now you don't have any means. Why should we, provide for you? And so it's just really interesting to see the dynamics that are going on, and why Isaac might be feeling so, kind of hard done by. He's just provided as much as he possibly can so that Joseph and Emma will get ahead, and yet they've squandered that opportunity by working on this Book of Mormon, which is just this delusion and this mechanism to defraud people. And you can just see the emotions of, do we support them? They're starving, but they're our family. We're responsible to them.
I feel at that point they might have thought that Emma was lost to them, kind of, Now she's spouting the same stuff Joseph is. Jesus is telling us. I feel at some point, you just go, I've lost both of them. I lost my daughter, my son-in-law. She's now fully delusional with him. I think you eventually maybe have to kind of set up a boundary and go, I can't. It's just too painful. It was probably really painful to watch.
Well, and they just set him up on a 13.5-acre farm.
Right.
Why do you have no food? You're a farmer.
Yeah. But he's
this
not.
Is what you're supposed to do is grow food.
Yeah.
And yet you have none because he didn't plant. He didn't plant, so he had no food. And so then they're going, we gave you the farm to take care of Emma, and you did nothing with it.
Yeah.
But it's interesting, you don't see that Emma was starving. It sounds like just Joseph and Hiram. So they were probably inviting Emma over for dinner.
Slipping her some food on the side.
Joseph and Oliver. Yeah.
Quite possibly, she had friends in the area, right? It seems like Joseph soon burned all of his bridges.
They probably felt sorry for her. But interesting how Joseph Knight's whole family was like, don't help those guys. I mean, it really gives you the sense of the tone of the area. Everybody's like, these guys are whack. We don't want any part of this.
To be fair, Joseph does manage to convince them, and they join the church. So
Joseph Knight.
I guess that's true. He did, didn't he? Yep.
Well,
So
again, it was someone willing to put money towards him, and then they were able to dupe him.
Yeah, that's sunk
And
cost. You have to.
well,
You've
yeah,
already invested.
yeah. Well, exactly. Joseph Knight Sr. is a investor. He's helping make this possible, right? And
yeah,
we actually see this later because Joseph sends out Joseph Knight Sr., Josiah Stoll, Oliver Cowdery, and Hiram Page to sell the Canadian copyright in January of February of 1830. So, he Joseph also talks about how Joseph Knight Sr. is going to buy a whole lot of copies of the Book of Mormon to sell in October of
was
1829. So, yeah,
was Joseph Knight one of the part of the gold digging thing that had happened there earlier?
kind of. He's really good friends with Josiah Stoll, and that's how he comes to know about Joseph.
Okay,
So he's
so
not in
he's
that.
kind of a believer in this treasures and
Yes,
magic
yes,
too. So he's able to dupe the magic thinkers.
yes, correct. Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
that's
I
right.
get it though. People want to think, there's something big happening that you could be a part of. I had a relative who started an MLM and it was a really good idea. And he had some pretty big investors. And I'm like, well, you know what? Oh gosh, I'll kick myself if I don't, get it on the very ground floor. So I admit for a couple months there, I put some money toward it just because I thought, there's a lot of hype and it kind of sounds good. And there's kind of some big people that are supporting him. Of course, after a year, it came to nothing. I didn't lose very much, but my mindset was, God, am I going to kick myself if I don't? What if it is, what
What
if
if
there's
it's
that
real?
chance? Yeah. So I'll admit to that kind of thinking. And if you're looking for something, something's going to happen, something's going to work out. Of course, you can talk yourself into anything for a while. And I think we saw that over and over. And Joseph was extremely persuasive. So
Just in closing, too, this is a classic picture that we see of Abinadi confronting King Noah and his court, that was played out in the Book of Mormon, and I think that this to me, when I'm reading the Book of Mormon and thinking about the Book of Mormon as autobiography, really is showing me the two characters of Joseph Smith Sr. as King Noah, who's lost the family farm because of his treasure digging, and Abinadi, who is Isaac Hale. He's the voice of religious reason going, you guys are money diggers. Your court is false. Repent, follow Jesus, keep the commandments. And Alma as the son of, or in the court of Noah, trying to decide between these two men, the king, the wicked king, or the prophet Abinadi. This is the story of Joseph trying to weigh the difference between his father as a money digger and his father-in-law, would-be father-in-law, as this righteous Methodist, Christian, and trying to determine who to follow. You see these echoes in this storyline. Alma flees the court of Noah, just like Joseph leaves his family and his mountain digging family in Harmony, Pennsylvania. He tries to join the Methodist Church. He tries to become more Christian to get the approval of Isaac and his family. He's trying to endeavor to change this money digging profession he has into a religious movement. And that's what he's doing with the Book of Mormon. So Joseph feels like he's righteous. He's trying to follow his father-in-law in righteousness, spurning his father, who's kind of an evil money digger at the time. Of course, Joseph Smith Sr. Converts to his son's way of thinking and joins the church. But this really shows that kind of feeling and operation that you see in 1826, 1827, 1828. These are the dynamics and the relationships that I think that Joseph is turning into a Christian adventure story, but he's basing it on real people, real events, real things and experiences that are happening to him and Emma.
That's pretty interesting because when you think about, we always kind of think, oh, Joseph was a treasure digger up to this point where there was the Glasslooker trial, and then his father stood up and said, yeah, I kind of made him go the wrong way. And, and we kind of say, oh, that's the point he decided to turn it more Christian and try to be more normal. But this is the same time that he starts spending time with his father-in-law, and he tends to become, I think maybe he sees his father-in-law as an honorable man, and he kind of says, oh, I ought to become more like that. And that's when he becomes more Christian, is when he spends his time in harmony with his father-in-law. And that's at the same time that he goes from money digging to selling Christianity instead of selling money digging. It's interesting anyway, the point you just made. So.
Yeah, I think there's a good case to be made for for these, and if these stories are in the Book of Mormon are things that Joseph is creating, he's creating it on the basis of, events that are happening to him, but also relationships that he's having. That's why they're so powerful in terms of their motivation, because it's really describing real feelings about real people, even in this kind of grand Christian, experiment. But they're compelling. They're compelling stories. They're compelling things because it's happened to him.
I love this picture. I was one of those kids that was never allowed to bring anything else to church except for the scriptures. So I spent a lot of time, scrutinizing every single little corner of it. I haven't looked at it for a long time. Now, of course, I'm counting the anachronisms, but yeah, this is always a very powerful image. And Joseph Smith kind of inserted himself right into that story.
And he saw himself as that Alma character
Right.
that had to choose, and chose Christianity over this, the sordid past, like it's, yeah. Like, all right. And yeah, that's kind of the end.
The end. And I love that you have pictures of the cover of your book, because we'll say again, at this point, if there's anybody out there who has not read Ganesh's book or has a copy, please get one. It is just amazing. And it's set up in such an awesome way that you don't even have to read it all the way through. You can kind of pick sections, go back and forth. Like if something that we talked about today kind of piqued your curiosity, you can find a chapter. I find this all the time. This is how Ganesh knows I haven't read his book all the way through, because I'll say, hey, Ganesh, what about this and this? And he'll go, oh yeah, well, that's on page of my, I'm like, oh yes, of course. Yes. So sorry. But no, you cover a lot of this kind of stuff in your book. And I just love it. I really feel like we should try to make a push to, bring Isaac Hale more to the forefront. He is the first witness. He really is. And like you described, he's somebody that would love to be able to say something good about Joseph. He would love it. He doesn't want to throw his family members under the bus. He would love to say that his son-in-law is, this kind of a person. So he's trying to be kind, you can tell, but it's completely damning, the things that he's saying there. So I understand why this was not put out in the forefront of the curriculum for so long.
Yeah, fascinating and amazing. And gosh, I have such empathy for Isaac Hale. Like he put up with a lot, just trying to, as you say, bite his tongue, try to see the good in Joseph, try to hope that things are going to turn around, give him chances, hope that he's going to make good on his promises, give him extra rope, because he just, he wants them to succeed. He wants to have a relationship with his daughter. He wants to see his grandchildren, but oh my gosh, the person that she's with, he just can't stand, because he just can't trust him. And it's so painful.
Yeah. Is there anything written by Emma's mother?
No, that's
she would have been seeing
Elizabeth,
everything too. Yeah.
She does not say a word. There's no idea about her very much. We don't hear her perspective or her opinion. The only thing that she kind of turns up in the historic record to do is to, at the very end, when the property, when Joseph sells the property, then she witnesses that, as one of the landowners. But yeah, she's kind of almost completely absent from the historic record, and we don't know why.
And her siblings, you would think they would kind of be seeing things, or at least getting
Yeah.
letters, or
So no, they don't talk much about her. That we have a few uh, uh, accounts and witness statements from Nathaniel Lewis, who's her brother, who is the local Methodist minister,
oh, that's
and he often has interactions with Joseph and talks about some of the, but basically he says a very similar but shorter thing than Isaac, and that is, gosh, I've had a few conversations with him. It's just all a delusion. I tried to warn him about not doing it. He asked for my advice, but he didn't take it. All those same kinds of things. Isaac just says it so well.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. If you have a family member that joins a cult and goes off, you eventually distance. You just distance. You can't reason with them. You don't know what they're saying. They're off on another path, and I think eventually you just sort of cut ties and move on. So, wow, absolutely fascinating. Landon, any final thoughts on this absolutely fascinating presentation once again from Ganesh?
I pretty much said my piece when I talked about the three witnesses and what that all four of these people now were witnesses of his character, and even a father-in-law who's trying to be kind can't find good things to say about his son-in-law. That's telling.
Yeah. There's the witness of the Book of Mormon itself, but then there's the ongoing witness of Joseph's character throughout all these events. And that's something completely different. And I think they purposely kind of steer you away from that and just steer you over to what has been said about the book itself. And there, as we said, there are other motivations to say what is said about the book. So, well, this has been fantastic. I bet the chat has been very lively because this is a very interesting topic. And I hope that you guys have gotten acquainted or reacquainted with Isaac Hale, because I think this is very important. And, I think there's more to look into. I think, like I said, let's bring him back. Let's put him up into the forefront and let's give a little more attention to what he was saying at the time, because I think it's really important. I think he really is the first witness. So let me know what you guys think in the comments, please. We'd love to hear what you all think about the presentation. Please like and subscribe to Mormonish Podcast. And if you'd like to be made aware of when the new episodes come out, you can hit the notification bell. In our show notes, we always have not only a description of the episode or any other relevant links to research from Ganesh, who has his own playlist on our channel because he's here all the time. We also have links to donor box if anybody would like to make a donation to help what is that they always say in Mormon discussions, keep the lights on at Mormonish Podcast. We are a nonprofit and we just appreciate everybody that makes those donations to us. You just really do make it possible for us to keep podcasting and have really interesting discussions like this one. We also have links to our merch store over there too. But yeah, thank you, Ganesh, again for bringing this to us. He's another one that I love because he goes, I'll make slides. And then he does. He literally emails them to me within a day. I'm just like, this is my favorite kind of guest. I love this. Absolutely. So thank you for being available and putting this together. Your research is amazing and you make it very accessible to people. I mean, you're a consummate scholar, but you never talk over us. You make it very accessible to just the common person who's trying to understand church history. And you do an excellent job of that. So we really appreciate you. And thank you for being on the show.
A pleasure, as always.
Awesome. All right, everybody. Thank you, Landon, again for being able to co-host. Thanks, Ganesh. And we will catch everybody next time on Mormonish. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.